to get to that point, I don't want to make it sound like, of course I did it. That's what I do. That's who I am. I'm a winner. But the reason I know what it feels like to win is because I know what it feels like to quit and be a loser. I, for 10 years avoided getting sober because it was too uncomfortable. So I would make any excuse to keep using drugs. Now, in my new life, I never take the easy way out, ever. I mean, I probably do, but as far as running goes, it's like, nah, I've done that so many times. I know the feeling and the sting of quitting.
Welcome to For the Long Run. We explore the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated, and how they've been able to achieve sustainable excellence. From Olympians to ultramarathoners and business owners, from the back of the pack and all the way to the front, we believe in creating community and expanding the running world for all. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt, and we're so glad you're here. You all know that I only work with brands that I can fully stand behind, and this episode of the show is brought to you by a brand that I'm proud to be partnered with, Zell. We all know brands who say they care about doing the right thing, but with Zell, they actually do the right thing. In their brand mission, it says, no matter where you live, your pace, or your personal relationship to the sport, you belong here, and they really mean it. Since 2007, they've been working hard to create great running apparel for women, but more than that, create a better and more welcoming community for all folks to help feel like they belong. Not only are they creating more community spaces, but they're also supporting seemingly overlooked athletes in the sport too. With the Year of the Underbird campaign, they've taken a group of marathon runners and decided to sponsor them to get to the Olympic marathon trials. They're working hard to amplify women's voices in the sport that we all love so much so that they can help pay that love forward. You can learn more about the Year of the Underbird at the link in our show notes. And one of the best ways to show what you are about is by where you invest your dollars. So if you want to support women in running, whether for yourself or for a runner in your life, I highly recommend grabbing some Zell gear. You can use the code FTLR for a one-time 10% discount on your order on their website. Thank you to Zell for being such a positive force in our community. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the good people over at Microcosm Coaching, our good friends TJ and Zoe. It's that time of year again, time to jumpstart your 2024 running goals. We love partnering with Microcosm because they truly align on our beliefs for this show. They support their clients through breakthroughs, setbacks, and plateaus, and are in it for the long run. Whether you're running your first 5K or your 10th 100-miler, the coaches at Microcosm have a personalized training plan designed to fit your life and your goals. Not only will you have a strong relationship with your coach, but you'll also be a part of a community of other people like yourself to help encourage you and strengthen your commitment and support accountability. We love their approach to coaching because it accounts for the whole human experience, the impact of mental health and performance, life changes, work life, family life, and overarching goals. If you're ready to get after it in 2024, you can learn more at microcosm-coaching.com and let them know we sent you. This is a fun one. If you know me and the For the Long Run team, you know it's important for me to forge local partnerships. You also know how much I care about making sustainable choices that are good for our planet, preserving the places we love to run. That's why we're so excited to be partnering with Emick Volkswagen, a family-owned and operated auto group based in the Denver-Boulder area. Emick has been in business for over 50 years, spanning 4 generations. Not like some dealerships that just treat you like you're a number, the Emick Group truly cares about customer service and has transparent pricing, and they're right here in Boulder. All this, and Volkswagen has one of the best electric SUVs on the market, the ID4. This car has a range of over 260 miles and is one of the few electric vehicles that actually exceeds its estimated range at highway speeds. Beyond using less or no gas, electric vehicles like the ID4 provide tons of federal and state rebates or tax credits, up to $12,500. When we think about partnering up with companies for the podcast, we want to make sure the company cares about our community, our planet, and has products we actually believe in. With Emick Volkswagen, it hits all the categories and then some. Stop by the Emick Volkswagen dealer here in Boulder and say that we sent you. Their team is wonderful. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, consider electric and consider the Volkswagen ID4. Thank you so much to the Emick Volkswagen team for supporting this community. Hey there, before we get into this week's interview, I'm going to ask a small favor. If you could go to your podcast app and leave this show a review, it would be so greatly appreciated. The more reviews we have, the more we can expand our show and community to more folks like yourself. Thanks so much for being here. Now, on to the show. So we're starting off with some ketones here, it looks like.
Ketone IQ for the win. Shout out HVMN.
So we are here today with Ken Rideout, and stoked to chat. Ken's got a beautiful background for those watching this. But Ken, thanks so much for taking some time to chat today.
Thank you for having me. I'm always quite taken aback when anybody wants to talk to me. I think the junkie in me still has that like self-loathing opinion at times. And yeah, anytime someone wants to take time from their show to talk to me, it's always a bit like, oh shit, oh, maybe I did earn the right to talk to them. But there'll always be a part of me that is like, full of doubt and, humility, for lack of a better term.
Do you feel it's a little bit of imposter syndrome too?
I mean, that was my feelings about myself when I first got into drugs, and I used the drugs as a way of coping with those feelings. And to a certain extent, yeah, maybe there's a little bleed over there and into my life as a runner. And I always feel like recently I just won the world championships for over 50 in the marathon. And while it's been nice to be kind of recognized and celebrated by some, there's also a part of me that's like, that I got beat by almost 30 minutes by the winner, right? Like, so I guess, I'm like the tallest little person. So although I should take time to appreciate the small victories in my life, there is a part of me that is like, well, you're not really the world champion, like keep it in perspective. And I don't know, I feel like I almost give my critics their own internal voice in my head, which I shouldn't really do. But again, this is like part of my journey, part of my struggle. And I think that maybe a lot of people feel like this at different times. I just, for better or worse, don't have much of a filter and can be a little bit too honest at times.
I love that. So Gwen Jorgensen sat on this couch behind me and talked about having imposter syndrome. Gwen's a gold medal winning Olympian.
I know her very well. I've been friends with her for years before she had a gold medal.
Yeah. So you talk about you won the world championships for 50 and older, and you were behind the formal winner of the race.
29.
29. Yeah, good clarification. And there is someone who she was at the pinnacle of peak performance in the world in that moment and still feels imposter syndrome. And so the reason I flag that is because I think it's just wild that no matter how successful you are conventionally or in your own mind, how you feel about success, like that thought permeates everyone. And so I got a note from a listener of this podcast a couple of days ago and was like, man, what I love most about this podcast is that I can be listening and hear someone speaking directly into my soul. My story is their story. And so I just want to thank you for your brutal honesty in many aspects of life, and particularly what we're probably going to get into in the upcoming minutes here. We missed the first question that I always ask, which is a really hard one. And that question is, who is Ken?
Yeah, I don't think that that's necessarily a hard question. We all know who we are. It's just a matter of what you want to admit and acknowledge publicly. Like we all look in the mirror, we know what we see. It's like someone asking, Ken, how can I lose weight? Eat less and exercise more. The end. There's no gray area. And I think the same thing is true when you ask, like, who am I? Like, as much as I like to tell you what a great dad of four, runner, financier that I am, like I can't tell you all of my I can't talk about all my wins without talking about all my losses because they help create who I am. I was a 10-year functioning junkie. I was an opioid addict, suffering in silence for 10 plus years, 24/7, round the clock, abusing prescription painkillers as a way to cope with my insecurities. It started out as an addiction to kind of cope and get comfortable with my own personal flaws and insecurities, or at least my perceived flaws and insecurities. And, then that became almost like a badge of honor that I was able to kind of beat this addiction. And I think a lot of times when people hear the story, it's hard for the listener to envision just how deep this hole was that I put myself into. I'm talking like around the clock, hardcore drug addiction that when you're that addicted to opioids, you can't just go like, oh, we're going away for a week. I won't plan ahead and get any drugs. Like, no, after a day or two, I'll be like deathly sick to the point where you're not faking your way through it. You literally, my wife would be like, dude, do we need to go to the hospital? Like, what is going on? You're sweating. You haven't slept in 2 days. You look terrible. And, so I can't talk about who I am as a successful individual without talking about where I came from. So with that being said, I initially started using drugs as a way to cope with my uncomfortable feelings. But after a short period of time, I'm doing drugs just to prevent getting sick. And that was a very painful journey and a lot of wasted time in my life. And then when I did get sober, when we started a family, I have lived my life to the fullest, and it's reflected probably most prominently in the form of running, because I was running as a way to kind of cope with the withdrawals and to cope with the feelings of, again, insecurity, etc., and social discomfort. And now, as someone who's sober, you're not just dealing with the same feelings, but you're also dealing with this pesky little addiction problem, which just adds to the workload. But I started running as a way to cope with those feelings and to way to cope physically with the withdrawals and the detoxing. And then eventually running became, not just a way to distract myself for 1 to 2 hours every day, because I just started running 10 miles a day when I got into this, but also became a source of pride. And it became almost like an identity. But more importantly, it became an accountability exercise for me of just like, no idea why I picked 10 miles every day, but I did. And again, I've told people this in the past. I've mentioned this in other interviews. It's like, for the longest time, I was just toiling in anonymity and darkness. Literally before work, it would literally be dark out. I'd be out there running, no particular goals, but I was getting much, much better. And I had done some races while I was still using drugs, so I was familiar with the whole racing community, and I started to do really well at different races, and then I started to win races. And like I said, I went from like kind of toiling in darkness to kind of slowly gaining some recognition as a masters runner. And then when that happened, I started to really lean into it. It became a much bigger source of pride, and I also realized with the consistency and the strength that I had built up, which is the key component in marathon running, I had an incredible foundation and base to build off of. And eventually I would hire a coach, Mario Fraioli, and we'd start working together and really grinding it out. And I got better and then started to gain a lot of recognition as I started sharing my story, especially the parts about addiction and the kind of self-loathing that goes with it. I think many people suffer with different forms of mental health deficiencies, if you will. And I think people really identify with that struggle. And I've been open in sharing like the wins and the losses. So that's a long-winded way to tell you who I am, but that's me. Very complex.
Yeah, aren't we all? I love that answer because, so I started asking this question because I didn't like the process of like adding an intro to the episode.
Yeah.
And so I was like, why don't I just let people introduce themselves? And in that process, I started learning that 75% of the time people would answer more than just, I'm a runner who likes this. And you get like a pretty inside look into their soul and what they care about and how they think about themselves. And honestly, the way that that question is answered is how I drive the rest of the conversation forward. Because it's like, you just told me what your values are and what you care about. And that's what you probably want to talk about. And it leads to a much more interesting conversation than, hey, I've got all these questions for you. Would you like to get through this list? So thanks for being open and honest with that question. And as someone who has been very open about my own mental health challenges over the years, I appreciate seeing another guy sharing the same in a society where, like, yeah, it's becoming a little bit more or a little bit less taboo for men to talk about mental health. It's happening because of people like you. So I first want to acknowledge that and say thank you for helping to drive that forward. I'm curious. So you said you started with 10-mile runs. That's a little bit more than many people do. How did you feel after that first run where you're like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to stick to it, but you still have to get out the door and you finish that first run? What's Ken feeling like at the end of that run?
Well, like I said, it's hard because I was always like physically fit. So I was always training. Like I knew what suffering was. I boxed for a long time. I played football and hockey in college, two NCAA sports. So it wasn't like I was immune to like that feeling of
Discomfort,
struggle, accomplishment, small wins. But I would say I was like everything else at that stage of my life. I was numb to a lot of feelings. Like people think of opioids as painkillers, but they're also joy killers. It's like numbs all of you. It kind of dulls all your senses a little bit. I mean, everything, sex, euphoria, everything is kind of dampened a bit. It starts out as like, wow, this is the greatest. I feel so high, to then it's just like, oh my God, I feel so sick. Let me take some pills. Oh, okay, I feel normal again, which is, a dumbed down version of who I really am. But I think that to your point earlier about, sharing the truth about mental health is like the one thing I have a lot of doubts and negative self-talk internally. But one thing I don't doubt or don't ever question about myself is my like toughness physically and mentally. And I think that when you are able to acknowledge your weaknesses to people in a forum like this, it shows a level of toughness that you can't run from. Like, we always think about, trolls. We're always like, the trolls are constantly on our mind, like, oh, what are they going to say negatively about me? And when you get to the point where you realize, like, from a negativity standpoint, like, what's someone going to say about me that I haven't already said about myself? Very little. And I promise you, from my own experience of being around a lot of high profile people and guys like Lance Armstrong that people love to talk shit about online, no one who's successful at anything wastes their time talking about others online. I don't know a successful person that would go on Let's Run or Slow Twitch forum and talk shit about another man and under an anonymous pseudonym. Like, what? What kind of man does shit like that? And to that point, none of them would ever say it in person. I've never seen someone, and I've been around Lance a long time, see someone come up and be like, you're a fucking cheater and I'm going to do this. The things that they would say online, they won't say in person. And I don't believe anyone would have that to say about me. Not that I believe I've got a lot of haters and trolls, but they're definitely out there. But I know that they're not going to say that to me in person. And I'm confident if they did, it would end badly for them. But that's, I think that when you have that level of confidence in yourself and that self-belief, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of share your truth with people. Cause I'm like, that's the truth. If someone wants to dislike me as a result, that's cool. And if someone wants to talk shit, that's cool too. I'm super easy to find. You don't have to do it anonymously online. You can tell me exactly how you feel. I'm very, very accessible.
I think there's a lot to be said for sticking to your guns and knowing your truth, right? So right now, there's a lot of shit going on in the world, in the Middle East. Too many people are dying on both sides. I'm a proud Jew, and I feel connected to the state of Israel because of my experiences there. Yet at the same time, I disagree with some of the stuff that their government is doing. I am standing by my statements around this, and I'm losing followers. And I don't give a shit, really, because it's like anything else is betraying my own integrity and my own morals and my own values. And it's the perfect epitome of what you're saying, which is like, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing.
Yep.
And if you don't stand for yourself and you can't get behind what you're putting out there, that's, what do you have? So I think this concept of like how the internet has evolved and how social media has evolved. Like I talk a lot with my friend Amelia Boone about this, and she's very open and out there about her own life experiences. And she's got a lot of haters out there, which is crazy. And the conclusion that we often come to is like, if you're not doing things that piss people off every so often, you're not really also making an impact, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to ruffle some feathers in the best of scenarios. And kudos to people who have the, you know, the stones to stand for something, and whether that's being proud of themselves or it's being proud of a group or it's being, you know, have a story you want to tell. I think that all that stuff is really important.
Yeah, well, you have to believe in yourself. How the hell is anyone else going to believe in you?
Exactly. So this podcast is all about understanding the why and understanding what enables people, as the podcast slogan goes, what enables people to go long, strong, and motivated. And so, Ken, I'm curious for you, how has your why evolved related to running over your experience over the last handful of years, going from this is something I'm doing for myself to, hey, I'm pretty good at this. Hey, there are a lot of people who are interested in me and my story. Now I'm in all these places and doing all these races and winning them and whatnot. So curious about that evolution of your relationship with running.
Yeah, it's interesting is on one hand, when I get attention or recognition as like a runner, it's uncomfortable because I'm like, dude, I'm just like anyone else. I'm an idiot. I have no special talent. I have no, people like, oh man, you're lucky this comes natural to you. I'm like, what? That's the simplest, dumbest answer ever. I was not a good runner. If I've done anything well, it's tried harder than others. That's it. Like I have no special skills whatsoever. I just decided that I wasn't going to be mediocre at this if I was going to spend time doing it. It was like the one thing in my life that belonged to me and me only. It didn't have anything to do with my wife or my children. It was just like that was my outlet. And it's easy to on the surface to be like, oh, it's kind of selfish to pursue that. I'm like, well, what? I spend 90 minutes to 2 hours a day by myself doing what I need to do to be mentally and physically healthy. Guys play golf on the weekends for 4 or 5 hours, no big deal. But like, God forbid I spend it exercising. Well, a lot of people understand, but I'm just talking about the people that want to simplify it. And, you know, my why has evolved. Like you said, initially it was just the thing that I was doing. And then it became something that I received recognition for. And it's been incredibly humbling and rewarding. And I would be lying if I didn't say I like how much I appreciate it. And it's crazy at times doesn't even seem real because I'm the same person that I've always been. I just had some success with running, but the way that people I know have behaved towards me has changed. I haven't changed, but other people have changed in the way that they perceive me, which could be good or bad. It's all relative. But the main thing that the running has provided is a bigger platform for me to kind of share my feelings and opinions. And there, with that comes a level of responsibility. But I would say that I've tried to be as motivational and inspirational as I can with my journey in explaining to people that, you know, it's just an exercise in extreme truth telling. We all know what needs to be done. Every workout I've ever done is available for everyone's use on Strava. You can go and see every incremental improvement, every training session, everything, like everything. And to your point, my why has changed from a completely selfish pursuit to now I feel like almost, and not to be overly dramatic or hyperbolic, but it's become an exercise in service and a way to kind of inspire and motivate just by, if nothing else, just showing that like through consistency, the goals you can accomplish are theoretically endless. And, showing up every day and doing my run is like I was doing it anyway, but now there's just more people watching. And I do feel a sense of responsibility to show up and deliver every day. I mean, I don't let that affect my decisions of what to do, when to do. When I'm sick, I don't run. But, typically I do this every day. And, Yeah, it's an example to my children of what's possible. I like that my children, that they see someone who's winning at a high level in their house, like meaning this is accessible. Like you can have this too. You see exactly what I'm doing. And they see, my youngest son got to go to that's the picture of him behind me in the cage between the main and the co-main at UFC. I forget which number, but in Boston, right before Sean O'Malley beat Aljamain Sterling. But Dana White brought him into the cage and took a picture of him, like, you don't wear your shoes in the cage. And he said to Dana after he got out of the cage, hey, Dana, he's a fighter. Next time you see me in the cage, I won't have shoes on. And I'm just like, oh my God, what an experience. But the point I'm making is, like, through the recognition I've received from running, I've been able to do things like, I also host the Fight with Teddy Atlas podcast, and it's given me a platform to interview guys like Dana. And then Dana was aware that my son was like a really accomplished jiu-jitsu fighter. But to be able to do those kind of things with my children has been magical. And then to have, we were sitting in the front right next to Dana in the VIP section, and to have like other like big name celebrity athletes, Johnny Damon with his World Series ring, Mickey Ward, who was the movie The Fighter was made about, to have those guys come over and like want to take pictures with me. My son was just like, his head was exploding. He was like, he's confused. He's like, Dad, I don't understand. Why do these people want a picture with you? I'm like, I know, buddy. You'll understand it when you get older. But, people like hard work, man. If you do hard work, and that resonated with him. And he's like, when I give him the choice, hey, he usually trains every night in jiu-jitsu from 5 to 6. And I'm always like, hey, do you want to train tonight? And he's like, yeah, I want to train, Dad. Of course I want to train. It's the only way we're going to get better. So, but being able to give the children an example of what's possible through hard work. And that's running. Running is a direct reflection of the work. Like the person that trains the hardest, typically they win. There's no like, I imagine if someone could just train half-assed and show up and beat everyone, it would kind of diminish the idea of being the best at it.
Right.
I'm the best at it because I've worked the hardest 9 times out of 10. Occasionally you get a rare talent, but it's like, no one shows up in training a couple days a week and wins the 100 meters at the Olympics. The guy who wins that has all the gifts and he trains like a dog. The guy's a maniac. That's it. So that's kind of how I've tried to treat it.
The hard work is a universal language, right? Like the guy that just won, I think the guy who won Chicago was reportedly running 180 miles a week. Like you have to have genetics in order to like be able to handle that load, but you have to be incredibly consistent and determined to execute that load. And so this is like, I don't know, episode 300. And my biggest takeaway from this podcast is that consistency is the secret. And that's it, right? Yeah. And so I grew up playing like a good New Englander, hockey and baseball. And I was never very good at either of them. And it's the kind of thing where like you're either good at it or you're not. And no amount of, skill development is going to enhance that, where in the same way that spending a lot of time focused on aerobic development will help you as a runner. And that's what I love, right? My circle here in Boulder is with a bunch of high-end athletes, and I like being in this environment because people are think about success in different ways, and they think about their ability to get better, not as winning the race, but as the ability to get better. And these are athletes who are, leaps and bounds ahead of me from an athletic standpoint and from a speed standpoint. But we can speak that same language of, hard work. And that's the piece I love. So the natural progression for the conversation is around, you talked a little bit about success and you've had some success or a lot of success. I'm curious how you define success, and we can go from there.
Yeah. Success to me is all based on effort. That's it. It's how we define success with my children. It's how I define my own success. And I give you an example. So 2 Sundays ago, when I won my age group in Chicago, about 2 miles in, an Australian guy ran past me in my age group because we had numbers on our front and back to identify who was in the age group. It was the age group world championship. So there was an identifying system within the race. So it was a race within the race. And I started in the American Development Corral, and a guy in my age group ran past me at like 2 miles, and he ran past me like with authority. I was like, oh shit. I can't, if I get on him right now, I won't be able to finish. I know I can't run 5:25 for 26 miles. At 5:35, maybe. 5:25, no. And so I just let him go and stayed patient. It was just like, all right, let me see what happens. It's a long race. And, with a marathon, to run your best time, you're like on the gas from the jump. So every step, you're like, oh, let me get one more mile and reassess. Can I finish? I don't know. It just, the whole way you're working. You're like, it's very uncomfortable. And I was hyper aware of that during Chicago. Then at 10 miles, the guy, by the way, both of the guys who ended up getting in front of me had both run 224 or 225 in the last year. My best is 228, which was 4 years ago. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can ever do that again. So in my mind, before the race started, I already knew there's the most likely these guys are going to beat me. But I wasn't willing to give up. I wasn't ready to concede defeat. That's why we run the race. That's why they have the fights. Regardless of the odds, everyone gets a chance, and let's throw down. So second guy goes by me at 10 miles, a Belgian guy who won the world title in the age group last year in London with a 225. And I was literally like, God damn it, I can't believe this. Third in the age group. I only wanted to win. That was all I cared about. And so there was a part of me that was like, just mail it in. We'll just get to the finish. No sense emptying the tank. Maybe we can find a smaller race in the next month or two and try to get a win, an overall win at a marathon. Anytime there's no pro field, if you can run 2:30, you can win most marathons outside of majors. And but I was like, no, fuck all that. Like, be honest, be true to yourself. Like, we trained, you're gonna empty the tank. We're doing it. I only have one speed, and that's all in. And I've preached this in every interview I've done, is like, no, I don't care what anyone else does. I'm giving my all. I'm giving my best. But just like everyone else, I have those doubts and I have that negative self-talk. And I was telling someone, I'm writing a book, and I was telling the writer today, I love this idea that I have in my mind of like, there's two voices in your head, just like everyone. There's like the voice that's like, fuck it, take it easy. Let's just mail it in. No sense in suffering if you're not going to win anyway. And that voice is, let's say, 49% of the narrative. And 51% of the narrative is the guy who's like, no, we're on the gas. You're going. You're doing it whether you like it or not. Have some integrity. Have some pride. And I stayed on the gas, running by myself for most of the day. And sure enough, at 21 miles, who do I see on the side of the road but the Belgian guy stretching his hamstring? I'm like, oh, shit. All right, second place. Not the end of the world. I mean, I don't want to be second. But I'm like, better than a kick in the ass. Let's go. Maybe I can. And I kept reminding myself, like, I was on pace. Maybe I can run 228 and get close to a PR, which I haven't done in a few years. And so I was like, let's go. Keep going. Thinking I'm never going to see the other guy again. He ran past me so effortlessly. He looked like a professional runner. And sure enough, at 24, who do I see coming back towards me but the Aussie guy? But he wasn't coming back like he was going in reverse. He was, so I ran up on him, caught my breath for a minute or two. I say a minute or two, 10, 20 seconds, just running behind him enough that he couldn't see me. And then when I made my move, I was decisive. I put it down and I was like, all right, I'm all in. Two miles, let's go. We talk about 20 miles being the halfway point. We're in the home stretch now. It's fucking, I'm all in and I'm legging it. And I put the move on. He didn't even try to go with me, but he certainly didn't give up either, because I only beat him by 40 seconds, but he was, slowly getting smaller in the background. And as I came around with like 800 to go over over a little overpass of an incline, I kind of came off the gas a little because it was uncomfortable. I shouldn't have, because as I turned the corner, I see the clock like, 228, 53, 54. I'm like, oh, I'm going to miss it. I wanted, how runners are. I wanted the 228 versus 229. So I ended up finishing at 229.08. But all I could do was, even though I won and I was so happy, I was like, why didn't I stay on the fucking gas and get under 220 and get a 228? Oh, I'm so mad at myself. But I think that that's the component that kind of makes me the person and the runner that I am. It's like, yes, I'm happy, but more relieved. but I always feel like I could have done a little bit better. And if anything, I wish that I could celebrate the wins a little bit more. And it's something that I'm consciously working on. But again, this is like a view into my own like twisted mentality.
If you've been enjoying this podcast and can spare 90 seconds of your time today, can you do me a favor? Can you pop over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review? It helps other people find and enjoy the podcast too. Thanks so much. This podcast episode is supported by Wazelle, one of my favorite brands in the running space. If you somehow haven't heard of Wazelle, they're a running apparel company that's run by women for women. And you might be thinking, John, why are you representing a women's running brand? Because here at the podcast, we only work with brands that we can stand behind, and we can fully stand behind Wazelle's mission and vision. Their goals are filled with integrity, design great product, build sisterhood, and improve the sport. And this year, they're taking these goals a step further with the Year of the Underbird program. They've selected a small group of marathoners who have secured Olympic trials qualifying times, women who have previously been overlooked or underappreciated, and sponsored them to get to the trials with stipends, gear, storytelling, community involvement, and potentially a bonus. Over the next few months, they'll be supporting a series over here at the podcast, helping to amplify and share the stories of these resilient athletes, all leading up to Olympic marathon trials in Orlando. Wazelle is striving to help develop athletes at all stages of running. They also happen to have some of the best running apparel for women out there. So if you want to support Wazelle in their mission to help people feel like they belong here, you can check out more about the Year of the Underbird campaign at the link in our show notes. And if you're in the market for some great running gear, head on over to their website and use the code FTLR10 for 10% off your first order. Let's help improve our running community together. While many of us are taking time to rest and reset this month amongst holiday celebrations and end-of-year work shenanigans, 2024 is fast approaching. It's the perfect time to think about and plan your running goals for the new year. That's where Microcosm Coaching comes in. Started by our past guests and good friends TJ and Zoe, Microcosm puts intentionality and thought into every aspect of the coaching experience. They believe in inspiring athletes to reach for more, find their community, and continue their running through the ups and downs that life throws at them. So if you're looking for a coaching experience that accounts for the breakthroughs, setbacks, and everything in between, Microcosm is it. They can help build a personalized plan to balance life and training. If you're ready to get started, go on over to microcosm-coaching.com and let them know that the team at For the Long Run sent you. I want to go back 24 miles into that moment where you were like, yeah, fuck it. I could just mail it in or keep the pedal down and be curious about what happens, right? Because I struggled with that decision so many times. I struggle with that decision so often. I've done a bit more racing lately than I have in the past. And for me, it's been the muscle memory and the repetition that has helped. Like, yeah, you'll survive. Like, you can push hard and survive. And that has been like helpful for me to understand how to overcome that. But I'm curious for you in that moment. It's nice to say, oh yeah, I decided that I was going to push the pedal down and not back off. But there's a lot of consideration and a lot of neurons firing and all this stuff that's going on internally that actually enables that to happen. So for you in that moment, what actually enabled that to happen that ultimately led to you getting, that incredible experience over the next 24 miles?
Yeah. It's like, to get to that point, I don't want to make it sound like, of course I did it. That's what I do. That's who I am. I'm a winner. But the reason I know what it feels like to win is because I know what it feels like to quit and be a loser. I, for 10 years avoided getting sober because it was too uncomfortable. So I would make any excuse to keep using drugs. Now, in my new life, I never take the easy way out, ever. I mean, I probably do, but as far as running goes, it's like, nah, I've done that so many times. I know the feeling and the sting of quitting. First time I qualified for the Ironman in Hawaii, when I got there, when I started the run, I was so depleted and destroyed from going too hard on the bike like a typical inexperienced idiot that I just was like, this sucks. I'm not in the money. I came up with every excuse under the sun to quit on the run. And that's what I did. And I walked back to the start line literally with tears in my eyes, like just a complete pussy and just so angry at myself in the moment. And then I went back the next year, did a 9:39, which was, for me, very satisfying. But the reason I know not to give in to your emotions, because they're just emotions, they're not necessarily reality, they're just feelings. Having given into those feelings, I can tell you firsthand that it's much harder to quit. That, like, looking back at it now, like, I wanted to quit every step of the way. You know how it is when you're on the limit and you're like, God, same thing with cycling. You're just like, I'm going to get fucking dropped from this peloton. Dang it. But you're like, let me just hang on for another mile. The next thing you know, 10 minutes later, you're on the front and driving the train like, yo, I feel great. 10 minutes later, you want to die again. But the point is, when you've been in that position so many times, it's why we train. It's why we practice. It's why we race a lot. It's like, I'm very comfortable with those demons that kind of like come into your consciousness in the middle of a race or in the middle of a trying situation. Like, dude, just quit. You're a loser. Come on, let's go back with the other losers and the other, heartless, soulless idiots up in the stands talking shit online. Let's go with those guys. And I'm like, no, I'm not with those guys. I'm down here with the people that win or die trying.
In the arena.
I don't exactly. And I don't mean literally die. When I say that to people, sometimes it sounds like hyperbolic, like, no one's trying to die. But when you're in that race and you're running it that hard for that long, you definitely have thoughts. And anyone who's been there knows this, where you're like, dude, I am suffering. Like, could I die? Like, I don't want to die, but like, could I?
Yeah.
But you never slow down. And that's what I mean is like, of course I don't want to die. If I did, I would fucking die. Like if someone wants to die bad enough, they'll die. And I don't want to, but I also don't want to take the easy way out when I know there's more to give, and I know there's more to give at all times. Like, you'll faint before you die, and that's not happened. And although I have left in an ambulance a few times, just from when they're like, "Oh my God, this guy's beyond dehydrated. He's a mess." But there's like joy and there's like salvation in that ability to control. Like Seneca says, we treat the body rigorously so it will not be defiant to the mind. It's like, I'm in control. My body doesn't get to say I'm suffering and we've had enough. Your body can take so much more than you think it can. Right? I mean, there's a gazillion stories, survival stories of people that have been lost at sea, lost in the jungle, and the shit that they've been able to do it seems impossible. So when you really think about it in those terms, like, okay, I'm running a marathon. Yes, I'm uncomfortable, but nothing bad is going to happen. And there's people everywhere. If something bad does happen, they'll save me. And if they don't, then it's probably it is the inevitable anyway. So, yeah, that, I don't know. Listen, I don't want people to listen to be like, oh, thinking I'm telling them they should do it. I can only tell you how I feel. And this is my truth. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, fuck this guy. He's a dickhead and he's a nerd. Like, I get it. But I can only answer the question honestly. And this is my reality, which to me is all that matters. And this is how I feel about it. This is what I do. These are the results. And I told you what my motivation was and where I came from to get here. So when you think about where I came from, by the way, when I was going through this addiction, I came to the conclusion that I'm either going to kill myself or get sober. I didn't want to die, and I did it. And when you've been in the depths of hell where you're contemplating taking your own life, I got news for you. Suffering through a race ain't nothing. This is nothing for me. Yes, it sucks in the moment, but look at us right now. I'm the world champion, and I vaguely remember how much it sucked when I was suffering for 2.5 hours. Last forever. And if I had quit and given in and not won, I'd be beating myself up for the next year until I could try again at the next world championships. But instead, I get to bask in the glory, even if it's just the glory of my own children in my house. I don't care if anyone else celebrates it. I can celebrate it.
That's glory.
Exactly.
That's glory.
Exactly.
You've alluded to it a little bit. How does curiosity play into your experience with running?
Yeah, it's the biggest component. I mean, I was saying to Rich Roll recently, I was getting ready to go on Rich Roll, and I was talking to my friend Rob Moore, who arranged the interview. Rob is my business partner and podcast producer, but he's also partners and producer to Andrew Huberman and Rob. We were driving to the Rich's interview, and I said, I don't have any other marketable skills other than being interesting. And he's like, no, I wouldn't phrase it that way. And I love Rob. He's one of my best friends. He said, no, I disagree. I would say what makes you interesting is that you're interested. You're interested in other people, and that makes you interesting, because most people aren't interested to learn. They're not interested in trying to do things that might make them uncomfortable, like the Gobi Desert race that I did. Like, if you're not willing to be uncomfortable and you're not curious to find out what your boundaries are, you'll never get to have the glory. And I was telling Rich after I won that Gobi race, I was like, man, I can't believe it. But dude, like, what else could I do? I mean, I wonder if I could win Leadville or Badwater. I guess I'll never know if I don't have the balls to sign up and show up on the start line and be like, guess what? I'm here. Someone's going to have to kill me to beat me. I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but you know what I mean is like, it doesn't just apply to me. It applies to everyone. What can you do if you committed to doing something? Like, could you be the best guitar player in the world? If you never take a guitar lesson, probably not. Could you fucking cure cancer? Well, you certainly can't if you don't put yourself in a position to try. And that's kind of been the like story of my entire life. I've always been the type of person that is curious and tries things. I mean, when I grew up in the inner city in Boston, I was working as a guard in a prison to pay for college. When I got out of school, like, I had audacious, fucking crazy goals that most people wouldn't even think about. I was like, I'm going to go to New York and see what's cracking and see what happens. I had a degree in sociology. I had a job at a pharmaceutical sales job. It sucked. And I moved to New York and didn't have enough money to even pay my bills after I paid all. I didn't even have enough take-home pay to cover all my fixed bills every month when I took out my paycheck. But I foolishly or optimistically figured I'll figure it out. And I did. And things worked, but that's the way my life has gone. I've always been down to try something. I moved to London at one point and like could have derailed my whole career. And I just was like, no, man. And it was the best decision I ever made. The experiences to me are worth everything. So if you're not curious, you don't get to have those experiences that are worth much more than material possessions.
Yeah. Show me a curious person, I'll show you someone who's going to go pretty damn far.
Yeah.
Someone who's listening to this and they're like, I wonder what I could do. How do I get into that mindset? How do I do that? I guess that's already being curious. So that person's well on their way. Perhaps a bad question there. So someone's listening to this and they're like, I like how he's framing this. I like how he's betting on himself. I like this. I like how he's doing it. What would you say to that person who's maybe like looking for that confidence in themselves or being able to bet on themselves or explore, well, what if I didn't let up? Or what if I trained a little harder or was more consistent? What do you say to that person who's like about to take that leap?
Fucking do it. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will either. And guess what? No one will judge you on your failures. Like, the expression, what would you try if you knew you couldn't fail? There's a reason that expression has such staying power, is because failure is a real part of life. You have to be willing. I mean, like, jiu-jitsu is a perfect example. My youngest son, he goes to jiu-jitsu, and I remember telling him when he started, if you're not willing to lose and not willing to get embarrassed and not willing to be the worst when you start, you never get to be the best. Imagine if you're the best jujitsu man and you've been going for years and years and some little shithead shows up and just gets to throw you around like a rag doll. Wouldn't that diminish the whole idea of being the best? You earn the right to be the best, but you don't get to be there without going through the gauntlet of starting out as the worst. And any fighter that's ever started fighting, including greats like Mike Tyson, when you walk into the gym on the first day, you're the worst. The end. Unless you have other experience, that you don't get to be the best without being the worst first. You have to earn the right to be the best. And there's a reason. Everyone who's been the best had to run through that gauntlet. And it weeds out a lot of people who aren't comfortable. And the reason I like jiu-jitsu is because to learn the moves and to get better, you have to get caught in all these chokes and triangles and different submissions. And when you get caught in them, you learn a lesson. Oh shit, I'm not going to do that again. And watching my son go through that is like the greatest gift, because as frustrated as he can get at times, I love debriefing with him after like a training session where I'm like, when he did this, if you had done this, he's like, yeah, I know. Next time I'm going to do this. And like watching him, kids are like sponges. It's why they learn languages better. It's why they can learn music easier as a child. The brain is like just so like a sponge, just waiting to soak up so much shit. It's why those first memories stay with us forever, right? There's like a blank slate, and the first time you get bullied or have a first kiss, it sticks with you forever because you've never experienced it, and then it sticks. And then throughout your life, you'll have more different experiences in different areas of your life, and they might not be as impactful because they weren't the first time. So I'm always super aware that my children are having their first ever experience at different things, and I try to make it as positive as possible, again, with the focus on effort. I'm always like, I don't care if you win or lose. I just want to know, did you try your best? Because I know when you're trying, and I know when you're giving up, and he, sometimes he doesn't. And sometimes we drive home and he's angry. And he's like, because no one likes to hear the truth when it's negative. And I try not to let his effort or his performance affect our relationship, but I always tell him the truth about effort. I'm like, dude, I really don't think you were trying. And I don't think you can say you were trying. And he's like, and then he'll pout, and he's a little kid, but those lessons are impactful. And that's why, like I said, the focus is always just on effort. Same with me in the race. Like, it was literally like the universe rewarded me in Chicago for staying true and staying on the gas and staying on 100% effort. I gave everything I had. And it was like, you know what? You hung in there long enough. Here, have a win. Because those guys should have beaten me. If we raced 10 times, they're winning 9. But I think they might have got concerned with each other and got tied up in trying to race each other and both gone too hard.
Man, I had a similar experience a few weeks ago out in Crested Butte. I ran a 55K, and I had the experience where the effort was perfect, right? One of these races where you control everything that you can control, and your fitness is there, and your training is there, and your mind is right. And it was 4 hours of absolute perfection. Like, wow, this is remarkably easy. An hour of like, this is getting a little hard. And an hour of like, you deserve to feel like this in this last hour. And I crossed that finish line, and I was like, I came in 10th in a race in Colorado. And I'm like, holy shit, that's an outcome. But I was so stoked on, like, I'd never had a race go so well in the aspect of the pieces that you can control, like the mind and the fueling. And I'm now craving that same experience of like dialing it in and nailing the execution. And then who cares what the outcome is, but it's probably going to be something good. And the way that you were talking about like everything in the execution and whatnot, like just reminded me of that. And it's such a rare feeling, and it's so worth chasing. And it's all tied up in the curiosity of like, well, what if it does continue to go like this? What if this is my day? What if I am that capable? And to me, like that race unlocked a new mentality or a new mind state. And it's not just present in running. And to bring it all together, for me, that's the value of running. It's the tying it all together. How do you take this and apply the lessons to life? One place where I like that crossover is business or entrepreneurship. So I'm curious for you, how does business and endurance sport overlap?
It's the same mindset in terms of commitment to excellence and effort. Like when I'm working on something professionally, I try to bring that same mindset. But one of the nice kind of carryover effect of running is that reputation stays with me. So I think that it's helped me tremendously in business to connect with the people I want to connect with. And, I work as a banker for 20 years. So now I work as a placement agent helping startups and venture and private equity funds raise capital. So, I've raised money for a bunch of brands that are kind of in our space, like Momentous, Power, Dot. And I've raised money and invested in those brands. And it's been incredibly rewarding. I've also raised money for a number of different venture and private equity funds. And, having that, especially in the last couple of years, having been able to kind of raise my profile as someone who's viewed as a good runner or an inspirational or motivational character, if you will, has been crazy helpful in just separating myself from the crowd. I tell my children all the time, like, do you think that people want to do business with the guy who's really doesn't have much going on, but he's a good worker and he's like went to a fancy school? But if you ask him what he's up to for the weekend, it's just going to be chilling, maybe go to the driving range. Or you talk to another guy who's like, oh, I just came back from Mongolia. I won a 155-mile race across the desert. Dude, it's human nature. People want to do business with that guy. So it's been
interesting people.
Yeah, it's been incredibly helpful in the sense of connecting with business professionals. And but again, I think that there's a fine line between being interesting, being successful, and being a narcissistic asshole. I always try to hedge my descriptions of myself by saying like, yeah, listen, I wish I had some more marketable skills, but right now being interesting is one of the only ones. And people, I think, appreciate the honesty and the humility in it, but it's the truth. And you can tell when someone's being honest versus, just the fucking humble bragging, like, yeah, I did this, I did that. I mean, there's a fine line. And I try to, again, like I said earlier, just be incredibly honest with my, wins and losses.
And then how does the experience of running support the difficulty of business?
I don't know about addressing the difficulties. Like everything in life worth having is difficult. If it wasn't, we probably wouldn't call it work. We'd call it fun. And I would just say, though, with the running, like one of the things that I try to take from running, or one of the things that I hope to gain, is by basically demonstrating to potential clients or business partners is like, yo, how you do anything is how you do everything. So the way I take care of myself and the person you see in front of you, this is how I handle business. Versus, someone shows up all dumpy and disheveled and they haven't exercised, you could tell, in months. And it's kind of like, it's almost like a joke to them. Like, well, dude, what? You realize you only get one chance to be alive, right? Imagine if you had a beautiful, like, fancy car, take your pick, a Ferrari, a Cadillac, whatever is fancy to you, and you just never took care of it. You didn't change the oil, it's filthy. I'm like, dude. Or someone shows up and their teeth are fucked up, but they've got a Gucci bag. I'm like, what? You wear your teeth every day. That jacket or that bag is only occasional. Like, the way you present yourself to the world is like a reflection of what they can expect in doing business or being in a relationship of any kind with you. And I really take that to heart. And I'm not trying to like be a fat shamer or trying to disparage anyone else. Again, I'm just telling you my beliefs. You can dislike me and disagree with my beliefs, but I'm sorry if you don't believe with my reality. This is what I believe. And if you think that this isn't true, I'm pretty sure this is like, probably can be scientifically proven that, people want to do business with people that take care of business. Like, hey, okay, maybe you think, oh, that guy's extreme. Okay, I'm with that. But do you want to be with the extreme guy who's like wants to win at all costs? Or do you want to do business with the guy who looks like he just rolled out of bed and couldn't give a shit about what you think of his appearance? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I think the saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, is true, right? It shapes how you think, it shapes how you act, it shapes how you talk, it shapes how you take care of yourself. And that's the sum of the people, like the influences around you. And so you can be particular around those kinds of things, and it can help you shift your approach and how you think about excellence and progress and improvement. And so, again, personally, I like to be around people who are curious, consistent, and passionate about something, because those are the traits that I find. Yeah, those are the traits that I find to be most admirable and lead to the most interesting conversations and processes.
Oh, I tell people all the time, surround yourself with the people you want to be like. And then, of course, the natural response from a lot of people is like, how did you build a network? And how did you make these friends? I'm like, dude, if you think you're going to go to like, quote unquote, a networking event, like, don't even bother. Don't even bother. Those are other idiots that don't know how to connect organically with people. I would say that the way I have connected with the people I've connected is by being someone that other people want to know. If you just show up and you're like, oh, I just want to glom onto some people that are interesting, like, dude, I got news for you. Like, I'm not looking for friends. Roster's full, making cuts next week. Please don't apply. I don't need any new friends. The way you make connections is like, I'm not here, like I just came back from Running Man. Like, I'm not here looking for friends, but inevitably you meet incredibly interesting people and you organically connect with them. So I would say if there's people that you want to connect, you have to put yourself in the social setting where you're going to have interactions with them. But then it's a fine line, because even at Running Man, there were people that will come and talk to me and be like, dude, you're just like me. I feel like you're talking to me. And I'm like, the point is, you don't have to blow smoke up someone's ass to like get them to like you. No one wants that. I know who I am. I understand all those things. It's basically by just having organic connections and conversations. And there's no magic formula, but it's being like kind, considerate, interesting, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just a process of being out there. But the most important thing, like I said, how are you presenting yourself to the world? Are you presenting like, hey, I want to connect with guys that are into fitness? Well, you should probably be fit, for starters.
It's a good place to start. Yeah. It makes me think of like dating in 2023, right? I met my girlfriend at a running retreat here in Boulder in 2021. And both of us were doing dating apps, and it was a failure, just like a ton of first and second dates and nothing interesting. And just to like be immersed in a place where both people are thriving and doing something that they're passionate about, you see people at their best, and you see people at their most interesting. And so in this world where so many people are craving connection, we're doing these things that enable those connections to happen through group runs and through events and retreats and whatnot. And so it just makes me think, or just like want to call out, like, if you're looking for those connections, go to places that you think are interesting.
That's it.
And there will be interesting people there. Like, versus just like sitting on the couch and hoping that, you're going to swipe and meet, dream girl here. But, it's happened. I have friends where that's happened, but statistically not going to happen.
But that's the key, dude, is that, like you just said, you have to be out there taking chances. So maybe it's a combination of going to different events, swiping, all of it. Because like, Wayne Gretzky said, you will not score on 100% of the shots you don't take. So for me personally, like, I'll fucking shoot from half court. I'm like shooting. I'm a shooter. I'll go down swinging, but I'm taking shots. Yeah. And it's the same thing with, not being afraid to fail and being curious. It's like, I gave up my job in finance, although I was like, by all metrics, like a very successful financier, trader. I could have continued to make good money, but I didn't want to be owned by someone, meaning I need to have the flexibility. If you're tied up with the wrong job, then you're not available when opportunity knocks to pursue different opportunities. And, the only way you get to that point is by being willing to bet on yourself. I mean, the most recent job that I had, I basically offered to work there for free. And when you have 4 children and living in a crazy expensive rental in Pacific Palisades in LA, there's not a lot of room for error there. And to work for free for 3 months is a huge deficit. I mean, I don't even want to tell you what my rent was, but it was like I didn't sleep for a few months. But the guy gave me an opportunity to work with him at the Palisades Group. A guy named Jack McDowell changed my life forever because he gave me the chance. After a few weeks, it was obvious it was work, and he gave me a real job. And over the next 2 years, we helped grow that firm from like $2 billion in assets under management to $5 billion. And a couple years later, he basically pushed me to go work for myself and go pursue other opportunities, and was such a champion about it and championing this cause. He was like, listen, I'm going to pay you your salary and then some, a lot of money for the next year for the work that you've done and to give you the runway you need to go work for yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. Wow. I mean, it was mutually beneficial, but that guy was like changed my life. But that's why when I met him, I just had an inkling. I was like, dude, let me come and do this. I asked him for a year plus to let me come work for him while we were riding our bikes together. I was working at a financial technology startup, working in LA remotely, which is hard because I'm not going into an office. I'm completely out of the mix from my colleagues. And I'm riding my bike with this guy 100 miles every Saturday and Sunday. And eventually he's like, all right, we'll try it. And I did it. I can't believe it. I mean, it's like, I feel the same way about that as I feel about the Chicago race. Like, oh man, that's one of those wins where I can't help but to be like, holy shit, I did it. And, but you know, it's like the same thing we were talking about earlier with how do you make those connections? Like, I don't know what the formula is, but I know I met this guy, I liked him, and I basically would have done anything to get that job. And there was no guarantees. Like, I could have worked there for 3 months and it could have failed miserably. And he could have at any point been like, this isn't working. But he stayed with it, kept giving me a chance. And now we've experienced tremendous success together and have done some like great things in that space that he operates in the private equity sector he works in. And but yeah, I was willing to bet on myself. And when people know that you're willing to bet on yourself, they know that they're seeing someone that's unique and special.
I could go for hours, but I think that's a good place to wrap today. Ken, thanks for being you. Thanks for betting on yourself and hopefully inspiring those who have listened to this episode to bet on themselves as well.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening to me. I hope I didn't offend anyone, and appreciate it. Please don't troll me in the comments. I'm a big baby.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf. Show notes have been written by Ruby Wiles and is managed by Emily Holland. It takes a village.